This is a production of WGBH2 Boston.
Tonight on Greater Boston, are politics and violence the new norm on the campaign trail? Our caucus takes up some very scary moments at the recent Donald Trump rallies. Who or what may be to blame, and the impact just ahead. Plus, a Catholic Memorial versus Newton North High School basketball game getting attention across the nation, with charges of anti-Semitism at the core as the Catholic school's students' fans chant, "You killed Jesus." We'll explore with Newton's superintendent and an expert in sports and society. Then actor and comedian Steve Martin tries his hand as a museum curator, and my thoughts on the retired Bridgewater State president, awash in taxpayer dollars. Election 2016 has taken a turn over the past few days, and not for the better. I'm sure you've seen footage of the Donald Trump rally that was ultimately shut down in Chicago Friday night. Thousands of supporters and thousands of protesters, fights breaking out, physical intimidation, and even police officers bloodied by the melee between the two sides. To those who were surprised, I assume you've been asleep for the past couple of months. Here's a look back at some recent Trump rallies.
In the old days, which isn't so long ago, when we were less politically correct, that kind of stuff wouldn't have happened. Today we have to be so nice, so nice. We always have to be so nice. Raise your hand. Who's the person that took action over there? Come here.
You know, the guards are very gentle with him. He's walking out like big high fives, smiling, laughing, like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
I don't take responsibility. Nobody's been hurt at our rallies.
Nobody's been hurt? Here's Trump's response when he was asked about the 78-year-old supporter you just saw who delivered that punch.
It's possible you could help him with legal fees if this man needs it.
I've actually instructed my people to look into it, yes.
Joining me now are Marcela Garcia, Boston Globe editorial writer. Good to see you again. Mona Haydar, local Ask a Muslim activist. It's great to see you, Mona, again, too. And Mo Cunningham is UMass Boston political science professor and contributor to Mass Poly Props. Good to see you,
nice
too.
To see you, Jim.
What was your reaction to this whole... I mean, this weekend was the most egregious thing, Friday night, but it isn't like it's new. What's your reaction been to all this?
It's appalling, but it's not surprising to see this developed into protests and people clashing. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up with somebody getting killed because, as you said, we have been witnessing this develop from point zero to this. It's been escalating, so it shouldn't shock or surprise anybody that
you
this is
wrote a piece in the Globe saying that some of the anti-Latino rhetoric may be actually an inspiring kind of thing. Not your word, but that's essentially what you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely, because we've seen some of these incidents play or happen locally. And what inspired me to write that was something that happened at a Celtics game recently when two fans started chanting in response to the name of a Latino player, the NBA player, who is not even Latino, he's from Spain. But they started chanting, you know, Trump, build a wall, blah, blah, blah. And then the response from the fans, which was essentially, you know, they had them evicted from the game. You know, in that case, it didn't really escalate, but we have seen this rhetoric have a real impact in what people are doing, you know, in real life.
Well, that's a cup half full kind of woman. Do you feel the same way about some of the Muslim taunts?
I do, absolutely. I think it's pointing out all the places where we have amazing work to do in this country. Be we Latino, be we Muslim, be we Black. There's so much work, and there's so much coming together of different communities to do that work. You
don't find this scary? Before we get to him.
Of course it's scary.
Yes, absolutely. It's scary, but I think it's going to help us long term. Yes. When Trump said on CNN with Anderson Cooper the other day, he said Islam hates us.
Yeah, he did.
You know, I'm just over here like, hi, American Muslim over here. Islam is an inanimate object. It doesn't hate anybody or anything. It doesn't have the capacity to do that. And I was like, oh, McDonald, like, stop.
So you think both think it provides a platform for activism to fill in the gaps in people's knowledge, for lack of a better expression?
I think that Mona would agree with me that we are not, this is not new for us. Like as a Latina, as an immigrant, we have seen this type of stuff stuff. Yeah. But for political correctness or whatever, it was not out. It was not, it was hidden, and people were very careful about, expressing this type of things.
People were tiptoeing around it, and suddenly Trump is out saying these things loud and proud, and it's like, oh, maybe we're not in a post-racial society. Maybe we have things we have to talk about and look at.
I want to ask you how you feel as a white male, what the response has been, because they're on the other side for the most part. One of the things that we love to do in all these settings, particularly in my line of work, is, we've never seen anything like this before. We've never seen, there's no precedent. Have we ever seen anything like this before?
Well, yeah, we haven't. First, as a middle-aged white guy, I have to say it's a real eye-opener, the degree to it. But we have seen it before. Immediately, you turn to George Wallace in 1968, who he was, although I think Trump is far more callous, far more willing to incite people than even Wallace was.
And Wallace ended up getting shot at the end of all this.
Yeah, he did in '72. But there was a rally in Detroit, 10,000 people that broke down into a chair swinging brawl. There were hecklers in New York, in Chicago. There were fights in these places, and people say the same thing about him. I was looking at it a little earlier today, and Wallace's supporters were saying he tells it like it is.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Wallace, because obviously that was a lot about race. Yeah. How much do you think this is about, or the activism, for lack of a better expression, on the part of Trump supporters, including those who crossed the line? Is it about race in this country? Is it about them? Is it about the color of the skin of the President of the United States?
It is very much about race.
Thank you.
And I will say this, that on the Republican side, a great deal of the subtext, and I don't just mean Trump, has been dog whistle stuff on race.
And like what?
And I include
like
the rest
what besides Trump?
He doesn't stand up for the Constitution, says Marco Rubio, things of that nature. He's the other. He won't even stand up for the Constitution. He doesn't believe in America. This sort of thing. It's really, it's not as bad as Trump, but it's meant to hit the exact same people with a little lighter note.
Well, let's see what the reaction is, both of the other Republicans and the Democrats who would be president too. Here it is.
There's only one presidential candidate who has violence at their events. And I do think Donald needs to realize and take responsibility.
This is a sad day. Political discourse should occur in this country without a threat of violence.
Donald Trump has created a toxic environment. There is no place for this.
The issue now is that Donald Trump has got to be loud and clear and tell his supporters that violence at rallies is not what America is about.
If you play with matches, you can start a fire you can't control. That is not leadership, it is political arson.
Marcella, you were nodding in agreement when most everybody said a couple of minutes ago, but what more do you want to hear out of those three Republicans? And the Democrats are saying what you'd expect.
Well,
three Republicans they're saying the right thing, aren't they?
Well, yes and no, because they're sending a mixed message. When they were asked in the debate, and granted, this was before the protest, but again, this is not new. This has been building up to that. When they were asked in the debate, would you support him if he's the nominee, they both said yes.
Yeah.
The three of them
said yes.
So it is a half condemnation or a half denunciation, and it doesn't work if it's that way.
Or Latinos, for starters. If this guy is winning in Florida as much as he's rumored to be winning over Rubio tomorrow, some Latinos have to be voting for him. Are some Muslims voting for him too?
I highly doubt it, and he talks about Muslims who have emailed him and talked to him and said thank you. I don't know any, to be honest, and I've been all around the country. But like I said, I don't speak for Muslims or Islam, and I don't think anybody does. But one of the things that's really dangerous that Donald Trump does is he talks about something that would significantly destabilize our country. Muslims represent 1% of the nation, but 10% of the nation's doctors.
I know that.
So if 10% of our doctors left, like Donald Trump wants us to, my father being one of those people, we would have an economy that would collapse.
Okay, so Mona says no Muslim she knows. She admits it's anecdotal voting. You agree. He can't have the numbers in Florida like he's got if some Latinos are not buying into this.
Jim, but you have to look at the Latinos in Florida. These are Cuban Americans who represent a very, very unique experience with the Latino electorate.
Yeah, but they are Cuban Americans.
They are Cuban Americans, but again, it's a very small, it's only like 2% of all the immigrants in all the United States. So, and yes, absolutely, I have heard anecdotal evidence that there are Latinos. Of course there are Latinos that support him. we also have, crazies and people that, nobody has the monopoly on that. But it's all anecdotal.
I want to talk about one other part of this. I want to play for you something that Donald Trump had to say about something I assume we all agree is a pretty important thing, the First Amendment. Here's Trump in Ohio.
We cannot let our First Amendment, it just can't. We cannot let our First Amendment rights be taken away from us, folks. We can't let it happen. We can't let it happen. We have a right to speak.
I just spoke over his First Amendment rights. Are you troubled by the fact that he didn't get to speak? I mean, I assume the core thing for all of us is, I agree with you, there could have been deaths, there could have been horrible violence, but he didn't get to speak, in part because of protesters whose message I assume you'd support. Are you troubled by the fact that he didn't get to speak or no?
As with a lot of things with Trump, there's always a grain where you have to nod your head and say, well, he's got a point. Of course, a person running for president should be allowed to speak and should have that opportunity, and his followers should have the opportunity to hear him. Absolutely true.
Are you troubled that he was shut down in Chicago?
Absolutely not, because we, the people, also have freedom to express our opinions and our views, and we've said we don't want to hear it in Chicago and many other places.
So should they go? By the way, he's accused the Sanders campaign. Sanders says I had nothing to do with it, even so some Sanders supporters. But MoveOn.org admits they were part of it and plans to continue. So should they shut down in a similar fashion every single Trump event so he never gets to speak again?
Why not? I don't think so. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be helpful. But what will be helpful is what we saw in Chicago. Communities unifying, Latino, Black, Muslims. Everybody came together and said, this isn't what we want. We don't want this in our city. Goodbye.
You want to settle this? It's 1-1. You troubled by the fact that he never got to speak Friday night?
I am not troubled because he has enjoyed most media exposure, like completely disproportionate media exposure. He definitely does not suffer from a lack of being able to sleep.
But if somebody's in the business you're in, there was an event where he was...
If there was a different context, if there were different circumstances, I would be troubled. But no.
You worry that he could be the next president of the United States?
Absolutely.
I mean, in a serious way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you?
I have deep concerns about it, yes.
You're the political scientist. Could he be president of the United States?
No.
Why not?
Too far out. People are not going to stand for this. Not at all.
Most unpopular candidate by far, and the person who's the second most unfavorably viewed candidate is the woman who's likely to win the Democratic nomination. That doesn't factor into this?
I think it does somewhat. I think it's a very polarized country. He'll probably run stronger than we'd like him to, but I don't think he's going to be president.
Marcel, it's good to see you.
Thank you
so
Jim.
much, Mona. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
You.
Great to see you, Mona.
Thanks, Jim.
Later, Jared Bowen shows us Steve Martin in his latest real-life role as art museum curator. Plus, the Boston Business Journal dubbed him the $1 Million Man, the former head of Bridgewater State. And I have a few more questions about how he got there. But first to the controversy that exploded this weekend, flowing from a basketball game between Catholic Memorial in West Roxbury and Newton North High School. Story was picked up by papers across the nation after witnesses said some Catholic Memorial students chanted the words, "You killed Jesus," at the Newton students, many of whom were Jewish. Afterward, the president of Catholic Memorial condemned what he called the abhorrent behavior, but some of his team supporters claim the whole incident started with homophobic chants from some Newton students aimed at the all-boys school. Joining me are David Fleischman. David is Newton School Superintendent. Good to see you.
Hi, Jim.
Dan Lebowitz is Executive Director of Northeastern Center for the Study of Sport and Society. We invited the president of Catholic Memorial, but he declined. We'll have a statement from him in a minute. David, exactly what happened? How did it happen, and when did it happen?
Sure. It happened, Jim, about 20 minutes before the game, and the Newton students participated in some chants as well that I think they regret, that the interim principal has talked to them about since. And they chanted a couple of things: "Where are your girls?" Sausage
boys
Fest.
School.
Exactly, Sausage Fest. And while the definition of Sausage Fest is not homophobic, it's the impact that matters. That's what we've talked to students about. And then, of course, the chant from Catholic Memorial, which was stopped immediately by their administrators.
But when you say stop them immediately, I made it sound in the introduction like it was just a couple of kids. This is 50, 60, 70 students from that school.
Correct.
Who were chanting this, right?
It was their student section.
And I want to read the statement from the president of Catholic Memorial, who couldn't be here tonight. We will use this incident as a teaching opportunity to help students understand the gravity of the actions of student fans, the hurt they've caused in Newton North High School, the residents of Newton, the broader Jewish community, and their school. There are no excuses for the actions of the student spectators who took part in the chanting. Their behavior was appalling. Their actions and words do not align with the teachings or the value system of our school or the Catholic Church. So while the principal, is, in my opinion, is an inexpert person, has said the exact right thing, in the Washington Post today, some parents at Catholic Memorial are saying your students started it, and they are considering things like Sausage Fest to be homophobic chants. You have any empathy for that position?
Yes, I think, student behavior has been something that our administration at Newton North has addressed for quite a while. And I think these chants can go over the line. And in retrospect, I wish our students had not chanted what they did. And
so you're talking about that too?
Yes, absolutely. We are addressing this internally as well.
Dan, I want to get you into this conversation. I think if students on the street had confronted Newton North high school kids and said, "You killed Jesus," I think we'd all agree this is anti-Semitism at its rawest and worst. Is it anti-Semitism when it's a bunch of totally irresponsible, immature kids at a basketball game?
Well, I think on both sides of the equation, using the phrase sausage fest and that type of thing about an all-boys school has homophobic implications. I think that saying you killed Jesus or the Jews killed Jesus has anti-Semitic implications. I think that you're looking at youth development, frontal lobes of young men and women in a group, and generally people act differently in mob behavior than they would individually. And so, in many respects, I look at Catholic Memorial's administration stopping the chant right away, saying all the right things, as sort of echoing what Cardinal O'Malley did earlier in the week when he was at Temple Emmanuel, talking about how the Catholic Church is celebrating 50 years of repudiation of the idea
that was the day before this, from what I understand, too. But I don't even want to admit some of the things that I chanted when I was in high school, and surely this is not intended to defend anything, but whenever someone yells racism or anti-Semitism, it raises it to a whole level. Should it be raised to that level?
I think in many respects it probably should be, only because what we're trying to do, if we're looking at this as a teaching moment, then we're trying to think, what does empathy mean? Empathy shouldn't mean pity. Empathy really is, what does the world look like from the person you're attacking's eyes out? So from the people's eyes out, if you're at an all-boys school, you don't want to be accused of being a sexual orientation that you might be or not be, and if you're at a school where a large part of the population is Jewish, you don't want slurs that could be read and felt as if they're anti-Semitic.
David, a lot of your parents, I've read in the paper, consider this an anti-Semitic act. Do you?
I do, and I think it's important, as Dan said, to name it and address it. At the same time, for us in the Newton Public Schools, it's an opportunity for us to look within, because we have issues that we need to deal with. The principal addressed the whole student body today and talked about issues within our school district, racism, anti-Semitism that kids experience.
Also the context, not that these students who are chanting this obscene stuff knew about it. You've also dealt with some anti-Semitism, some graffiti. Is it a middle school?
Absolutely.
Including, what is it?
Gay middle school.
Burn the Jews scribbled onto a... So this can't be taken out of that context. What do you want? I mean, after the game, I think to their credit, was it the principal or administrator was there, had these kids shake the hand of the principal of Newton North, which I think is a wonderful first step.
Absolutely.
What more do they have to do, in your estimation, to, I don't want to say atone, but to show that they really get how wrong they were at this game?
Yeah, I think they're doing all the right things. As Dan said, they are looking at their curriculum. They're talking to the Anti-Defamation League. It's a real opportunity for them. But honestly, Jim, our energy is focused on our own school and what we can do, because we have work to do, and this was a real reminder that we have more.
How much of an outlier? As we're talking, I'm thinking about Jeremy Lin when he was playing at Harvard, and then he was playing in the NBA. He was a huge star for a month and a half in the NBA, real good basketball player. Now he's out of Houston or somewhere. These anti-Asian chants virtually anywhere. I mean, you go to a baseball or a football game, it's all, this is not to excuse it. This is to condemn how omnipresent it is. This is all over the place. Hopefully not from high school kids, but it's everywhere, right?
I think that there's a visceral nature in sport that, fanaticism and fanhood, there's a very thin line. And when you start to get fanatic about your team or about the chances or cause of your team, you tend to get into that visceral space. Does it make it right? It absolutely does not make it right. And are we supposed to look at it like that teaching moment and then respond in ways that call that moment out and as we were saying, create curriculum around it and make sure that teaching moment doesn't get lost, because we're not trying to go backward. We're trying to have a conversation about same-sex being, relationships being the evolution of mankind in many respects, or anti-Semitism being a scourge that needs to be removed.
You've seen him be an incredibly positive guy, much more positive than I am in similar kinds of stuff. So what is your final takeaway here, David?
You know, this is an opportunity, and unfortunately this happens in our society all the time. And I think we have a special responsibility right now, given the national climate, to really work with young people and help them understand the impact of their language and their actions, because we need to make sure we can deal with it inside schools, because let's face it, outside schools, there's a lot going on.
That's a wonderful point, David. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so
much
for
very
your
much.
time, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Time now for tomorrow's Globe Tonight. Your first look at Tuesday morning's Boston Globe with city editor Stephen Smith. Hello there, Steve. What are you featuring tomorrow, Steve?
Hello there, Jim. The family of DJ Henry has reached a $6 million settlement with a New York town and with the police officer who mortally wounded the college student from Easton, Massachusetts. You will remember the heartbreaking details of this. Police were summoned to disperse a crowd outside a restaurant in Thornwood, New York in 2010. DJ Henry was behind the wheel of a car. He was unarmed. Something went terribly awry and the police officer fired, killing Henry. There were calls for prosecutors to take actions against this police officer. A federal prosecutor did investigate, found inconsistencies in the stories of police and witnesses, but decided ultimately that there were not sufficient grounds to proceed with a criminal civil rights case against the officer.
Let me editorialize briefly. You don't have to respond. The local prosecutor was a disgrace, and the Henry family are amongst the finest people I've ever met in my whole life. What else do you have in the paper tomorrow, Steve?
So, Jim, you have to ask yourself, who would possibly want to challenge a governor with the sky-high popularity ratings of Charlie Baker?
And?
We might know Dan Wolf, state senator, Cape Air CEO. In an interview, he said he's made no decision about challenging Baker in 2018, but he offered a searing critique of both Baker and his own party.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's good to talk to you. Speak to you again tomorrow. You know him as an actor, comedian, possibly even banjo player. But these days, Steve Martin is trying out a new role. As WGBH arts editor Jared Bowen shows us, Martin is curating an exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts.
You know, my wife and I will sometimes just sit and watch a painting like we'd watch a TV show. You know, just sit and go, then look at this and look at that.
For as long as Steve Martin has been Steve Martin, a bright king of comedy, star of many a touchstone film, he's also been a passionate student, patron, and collector of art.
Art has been very significant in my life.
About 20 years ago, Martin encountered the work of painter Lawren Harris, now considered a Canadian national treasure. In the 1920s and 30s, Harris boldly reinterpreted what he called the Great North, with his solid, serene landscapes.
I think he's a very stirring painter, and he had a great accomplishment. And it's unfortunate, you know, that America knows of the Canadian comedians, and they know of the actors, and they know of the singers, but they know nothing about Canadian art.
Harris founded what became known as the Group of Seven, a collective intent on creating a classically Canadian style. Their travels took them to the furthest reaches of Canada. They are vibrant scenes of nature, but entirely devoid of life.
I believe he viewed isolation as spiritual or metaphysical, and he imbued his paintings with it. There's nothing organic in them. He's dealing with the spirituality of just the naked planet.
Embarking on his curatorial quest, Martin crisscrossed Canada much as Harris did, making it a point to see every painting in person before including it in the show.
When you just have a passing familiarity with his work, you tend to think of them as blue and white. But the more time I spent with him, I realized the range of color was vast. If it's true that Inuits have 50 words for snow, you know, Harris has 50 gradations of blue.
Harris was a pioneer painter, arriving at a style all his own. But Martin points out in this companion show from the MFA's own collection, American artists were developing a similar aesthetic. With artists like Georgia O'Keeffe, Edward Weston, and Arthur Dove, the modernist movement was taking hold across the Americas.
These painters are not a group. They didn't have a manifesto among them. But you feel the companionship, even as their styles are diverse, that they're presenting something new and disparate yet unified.
And purely ideal. Jared Bowen, WGBH News.
That's pretty great. You can see more of Jared's interview with Steve Martin on Open Studio next Friday at 8:30 p.m. You can always find more online at wgbh.org/openstudio. So file this IMHO under how does he live with himself? The him in question is former Bridgewater State University President Dana Moeller-Faria. Here's what we learned based on some fine reporting by Craig Douglas in the Boston Business Journal. Upon retirement last year, he received a one-time payout of $269,984 for roughly 900 allegedly unused sick and vacation days. 900. That's roughly 4 full years of work. That comes in addition to his $183,421 annual state pension. Not done yet, which comes on top of the $8,333 per month in consulting fees he collects from the university. That's another $100,000 a year. But back to the $250,000 plus for unused leave. While he apparently took virtually no time off during his final 3 years at the school, he did have time for taxpayer-funded trips to places like Cape Verde, he's Cape Verdean, Belize, Morocco, Turkey, and Iraq. Now let's put this money grab in a little context, too. According to the head of the union there, adjunct faculty at Bridgewater saw just a 2% pay hike this year. Teachers, by the way, who can accrue no more than 64 days of unused leave time, Moeller-Faria was paid for 15 times that much. And tuition for mass residents at the school rose at more than 2 times the national average. And while we're at it, read Shelley Murphy's story in the Globe on the unemployed father dealing with $246,000 in student loans for his 3 kids, one of whom went to Bridgewater State. So while the state auditor is looking into this, so far nothing has been deemed illegal. And if it's not, laws need to be changed. First, these obscene accrual schemes need to be reined in, and so do the pensions. When I raised the issue with Senate President Stan Rosenberg today on Boston Public Radio, he agreed, citing a legislative cap of $125,000 pension for all new employees. But with the inflation adjustment allowed, that would be $226,000 if that person retired in 20 years. I'd consider that problem not solved. The legislature must act. For now, I hope President Moeller-Faria, who we've invited to join us, is enjoying his retirement on the taxpayer's dime. What do you think? Email us, tweet us, share your thoughts. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. 5 years since the start of Syria's civil war. The Ground Truth Project's Charlie Sennett joins me to talk the state of the country now and how its people are coping as millions flee and many struggle to survive anywhere. And a preview of what, should we call it, I guess, Mega Tuesday voting that could send even more would-be presidents home. That and more tomorrow at 7. One more thing before we go. As you may know, today is Pie Day. But did you know it's also National Potato Chip Day? Apparently, the chip was invented in Saratoga Springs in 1853, not that you asked, when a customer kept complaining his fried potatoes were too soggy and repeatedly sent them back. Finally, the chef sliced the potatoes as thin as he could, fried them until they were hard, added salt, and the rest is history. Now, we as a nation eat about 1.2 billion pounds of chips each year, about a third of that in my house.